Do you remember what frightened you as a child? I was recently reminded of my own childhood fear. I hadn't thought of it in a long time. It's something I outgrew, and seems ridiculous to think about now, but was very real around the time when I was in first grade. We've mentioned before on this channel that we grew up in a very religious environment, and like many, we were taught to believe in the rapture. It's the moment when the real believers are taken from this world in an instant, leaving everyone else to suffer, as the prelude to the end of the world is kicked off. And as a very young child, I was terrified of it. So whenever it started getting late, and my parents still hadn't come to pick me up from school, or if we were home alone and my parents' errands took longer than expected, I would start getting anxious. My hyperactive brain would build innumerable what-if scenarios. What if we were left behind? How am I going to take care of my brother? How will I take care of myself? How are we going to survive what comes next? Skinamarink reminded me of being that frightened young child. Skinamarink is a very lo-fi, micro-budget horror movie by first-time director and fellow Canadian Eduardo Gonzalez. It's about two very young children who wake up in the middle of the night to find that their house no longer has any doors or windows, and their parents have mysteriously disappeared. To make matters worse, there is a sinister entity that has taken control of the house and is eager to play with the children. The movie feels like a combination of waking up in a pitch-black bedroom while watching a creepypasta video south of a YouTube rabbit hole. It has only 4 characters that you barely see or hear. There is no soundtrack. There's a lot of digitally added grain to give the visuals a quality that would resemble that of a camcorder from the 90s. There aren't that many explanations as to what is happening, and still, even with all of these limitations, it's a movie that has stayed in my mind ever since I watched it. It left me with an ambiguously familiar sense of unease and anxiety that took a while to unpack and get a handle on. If you read any comments regarding the film, you can see that the same feeling was awoken in many viewers for different reasons. In today's video, we will be delving into how Skinamarink manages to make us relive childhood phobias, specifically through the usage of dream logic, the child perspective, and by the manner in which it's made to feel personal. If you haven't watched the film yet, please be advised that there will be spoilers.
And also, this video is sponsored by Factor, but more on that later.
Dad?
I don't know about you, but the grainy and dark nature of the visuals reminded me of waking up at night with the lights off, surrounded by a flickering, non-uniform darkness. It's something that I feel HD movies have had a hard time interpreting. They are too clean, tack sharp, and one could say unrealistic to what the human eye really sees. This reminded me of the groggy feeling of walking in the hallway without my glasses on, maybe with a faint light coming from the living room as my eyes adjusted to the darkness. On my way to get a drink of water within that liminal space between bedtime and the time to wake up, where sometimes you're not sure if you're awake or if you're dreaming. Eduardo Gonzalez has experience in bringing nightmares to life. He has a YouTube channel where viewers would send in descriptions of their nightmares, and he would turn them into mini movies. Part of the idea for Skinamarink came from many people describing having nightmares as children where they would wake up and find their parents gone, and instead, there would be a monster in the house. Skinamarink follows that same weird hazy dream logic where something familiar morphs into something you both recognize and don't, all at the same time. Like the uncanniness of the blinds over the blank wall where the window used to be, the toys that appear plastered on the wall, or the chair hanging from the ceiling. All familiar and inconsequential elements that on their own would never make you flinch, but when presented in an incongruous manner, elicit unease and repulsion. The disembodied voice that can become that of the parents as well as something menacing, the sudden appearance and disappearance of the father and the mother, are all made eerier by the camera angles, creating an uncanny spatial disorientation within something that should be relatively easy to orient yourself in. It's also a disorientation that comes from a very undefined sequence of events, jumping from one moment to another in an almost confusing manner, removing any sense of the passage of time. It's like a relentless and unforgiving dream, which is mirrored by the nature of the entity's taunts, ordering the children around, taking Kaylee's mouth away because she didn't do as she was told, making Kevin hurt himself with a knife, then offering a way out with a working phone, only to make it turn into a grinning toy. It's a living nightmare the children are trapped in, forced to relive over and over again, like the cartoon that keeps playing on a loop. But unfortunately for them, they don't have the option to wake up.
Before we continue, this video is sponsored by Factor. Something else that some people might find to be an endless loop is preparing meals for themselves every day. And it's understandable. Sometimes they're very busy and have no time to prepare a good meal, so you decide to get takeout. But that adds up and is not always healthy for you. That's where Factor comes in and becomes a very convenient meal option that can be delivered right to your doorstep. They offer a wide variety of fresh chef-cooked meals for all kinds of dietary needs. Keto-friendly, low-calorie, vegan, anything that can help you attain your dietary goals. No prep, no mess, and you're ready to eat in 2 minutes. Choose the meal plan for you. From 4 to 18 meals per week, you can add or reduce a meal, or even skip a whole week if you want to. So go ahead and check them out. Use my link or go to go.factor75.com and use code FACTOR SE33251 for 50% off your first box. Now back to Skinamarink.
Being trapped in a nightmarish situation is scary enough, but it's amplified by the fact that the ones that are trapped are 2 very young children. The film makes sure to establish that we are going to experience the story through their eyes and in their context. Early on, we see a few shots almost at ground level looking up, making the door look so tall with a doorknob at the highest point of the frame, giving us a sense of scale as to how big the house is in comparison to the children, further evidencing their helplessness. Whenever they speak, we can hear that they sound like regular, non-precocious, age-appropriate little kids.
Can we sleep downstairs tonight?
And we even get subtitles, because not everything they say is easily decipherable. Once the father vanishes, along with any means of escape or communication with the outside world, we are exposed to the children's fragility as real-life fears that any child might have begin to manifest themselves. Even though we've all had different experiences when we were very young, these are fears we can relate to for the most part. Children can experience very strong fears, even at a primal level, because they are experiencing things for the first time and are not contained by rational thought. They inhabit a world where anything can happen, and the negative of that belief can be very terrifying. They turn all the lights on because it's safer, and we as viewers can sympathize because the darker and grainier the screen gets, the higher chance that you could start seeing odd shapes and figures in the dark. The entity tells Kaylee to look under the bed and Kevin to come to the basement, 2 simple tasks that would cause many kids to have apprehension because traditionally, that's where the monsters hide. There is also the fear of having your parents divorce, as hinted at by the mother as she talks to Kaylee.
Your father.
The fear of losing your parents and finding yourself alone to take care of yourself and your sibling is one that the children are living. They cope by trying to act as normally as possible, watching TV, playing games, playing with toys, eating cereal, keeping busy in the hopes that it'll all be over soon and normalcy will be restored. In the mind of a small child, their parents, or even adults in general, are able to do anything. In this scenario, they are met with a being that is powerful enough to actually do anything, to alter reality, so that what once seemed permanent, a constant in their lives, changes and is taken away. Children need structure, safety, and reassurance, all elements that are stolen from Kaylee and Kevin and replaced by their fears made flesh. Skinamarink is deeply connected to the director's past. Sure, a writer-director has a personal relationship with the story he creates, but in this case, it goes further. As mentioned before, the idea for the film came partially from people's descriptions of their nightmares, which were similar to the one Kyle Edward Ball had as well. The film's title comes from a song that reminded the director of his childhood, and so, among other reasons, he kept it because of that association. The movie was also filmed in the house he grew up in, giving him unique insight as to how to make it look and feel creepy. In addition to having his own proximity to the film, the director made the movie evocative and abstract enough so that the viewers could have their own personal relationship with the material. During a Q&A, Ball stated that although there is a Hansel and Gretel type story within the film, his intention was that everyone that sees it could have their own version wherein they attribute their own interpretation. Reading the comments on Letterboxd or on the interview videos on YouTube, you can see the different meanings people come up with, and they're not necessarily wrong. The focus on the children's POV, general childhood fears, the dreamlike narrative, they are all basic elements that bring us closer to the story and serve as the skeletal structure underneath the eventual interpretation we choose. We all bring in our own baggage to populate the open-ended spaces offered by the film, personalizing the experience further. A type of cinematic cold reading. That's why certain lines of dialogue, or images, or sounds, or specific toys make people conclude that Skinamarink is about child abuse, or a metaphor for a bad divorce, or living with an unstable parent, or sleepwalking during a sleepover, or abandonment. There's a familiar element that triggers a memory, and emotions associated to that memory. I can't speak to anyone else's experience but my own, which is why when I see Kaylee and Kevin keep busy with their playtime near the constant drone of the TV in a mid-90s disconnected world, as they deal with being all alone, well, it hit very close to home. I can remember playing with Lego blocks, drawing, watching tapes, all in the hope that it would take my mind off of the possibility that my parents weren't coming back, and that I had to fend for myself and care for my brother. More than being startled by well-constructed jump scares, or weirded out by the uncanny imagery, or disturbed by the entity's cruelty, what the film awakened in me is the fear and anxiety I would get when I thought that I had been left behind. The primary disconcerting fear of being forgotten. Kyle Edward Ball created an effective horror movie that can unnerve you on the surface level, but in the end, uses your own past, nightmares, and memories to truly frighten you.